Good morning. Welcome to the Governmental Affairs Committee meeting. We do have a quorum. We have several people with us on Zoom, and I'm going to ask before we get started if Chairman, will you give us our blessing? Thank you.
Please bow your heads with me. Lord, we pause now as we begin this Government Affairs meeting. We ask that your wisdom as always be in this room. Let us have the thoughts and the questions and the conclusions available to best serve our great state. Bless us and keep us as we move forward. Amen.
Thank you, Chairman Fleming. All right, we are going to take up the first bill, and Representative Evans, if you will come forward with your bill, that's House Bill 712. This is a hearing only.
Thank you so much, Chairman Taylor. I really appreciate the opportunity to come before you this morning. And thank you so much to the Governmental Affairs Committee for hearing this bill. And I bring before you House Bill 712. And this bill protects Georgia from any litigation regarding the First Amendment rights in regards to anti-boycott laws. I feel House Bill 712 is a better choice than House Bill 383, which you passed out of committee last week. House Bill 383 addressed parts of the unconstitutionality of the original anti-boycott law passed in 2016, and this bill, House Bill 712, repeals the entire law so that Georgia and our taxpayers will be fully protected from litigation. Now, I think you already heard last week about the law in 2016 and how it's being challenged in court, and it's been overturned in 3 court cases. So I won't review all of that data in the view of time. But I did want to point out that the groups that were defending the right to boycott that have come out in favor of the defendant, Georgia's being sued right now by a speaker who wanted to. Okay, going on. I should stick to my notes, but I'm a little nervous here. I apologize. But I just do want to say that the groups that are in support of repealing this anti-boycott law are TRUA, J Street, CARE Georgia, the ACLU, and the Partnership for a Civil Justice Fund. And TRUA represents more than 2,000 Jewish clergy across North America, along with thousands of Jewish lay people and activists. And J Street is a pro-Israel organization with over 200,000 supporters, including rabbinical and lay leaders. And Jewish Voice for Peace is a Jewish organization with over 200,000 supporters and a rabbinical council. And all of these are like speaking out for equality and human rights. And then, of course, we have CARE Georgia, which is the Council on Islamic Relations, and the Partnership for Civil Justice Fund. So both last year, CARE Georgia and Partnership for Civil Justice Fund filed this lawsuit against the state of Georgia on behalf of a journalist whose contract for speech was canceled at Georgia Southern University because she refused to sign the anti-boycott law. And both TRUA and J Street filed briefs in court supporting the law. And they applauded the decision in the 8th Court reaffirming the unconstitutionality of the law. And both of them noted that there is a strong Jewish tradition reflecting a strong commitment to freedom of thought and expression. Both believe that those who believe there is one acceptable view on Israel, theirs, should not be allowed to impose constraints on what constitutes acceptable speech in the Jewish community or in the broader marketplace of ideas. And that censorship of those who question American or Israeli policy puts the intellectual integrity and future of the Jewish community at risk. And while neither J Street nor TRUA supports boycotts of Israel, both groups oppose efforts to silence or penalize people or corporations who choose to boycott. As they wrote, such censorship is contrary to human values and the First Amendment. These groups and many other Jewish organizations believe that our communities are strengthened by vigorous debate, free speech, including the right to boycott and the right to speech with which we may vehemently disagree, constitute an essential component of our democracy, a basic human right, and a fundamental value of Judaism. Yes, so with all of that in mind, I'm asking you to support House Bill 712 for 3 reasons. The underlying law is unconstitutional. We should all protect the right to boycott, and it avoids any future court decision down the line. First, the law we passed last week, House Bill 383, and our current law are unconstitutional. Our government cannot economically punish individuals or corporations for engaging in boycott, which is an exercise of free speech. And I won't review our whole history of boycotts, in America. I think we are all familiar with the power of that. And I would say also the government cannot treat speech unequally by singling out a boycott against one particular country for punishment while allowing boycotts for every other country in the world. By allowing state workers and contractors to boycott every single country in the world except for Israel, the underlying law and House Bill 383, which we passed last week, confirms that the purpose of the law isn't to protect our state's economy or trade relationships. If protecting trade was the goal, the law would ban boycotts against any and all nations that have a trade relationship with Israel, including other countries facing international boycotts over their policies, like China. This law does not do that because the true goal is to silence and punish Americans who boycott in support of Palestinian human rights. The second reason you should pass House Bill 712, or I ask for your consideration, is that it avoids future court decisions striking down the law. I would argue that the purpose of House Bill 383 was to try to preempt and avoid a federal court decision down the law. For example, House Bill 383 increases the value of the contracts that require the boycott oath from 1,000 to 100,000. Why? One reason is that individuals and corporations up to 4 people can speak freely about Palestinian rights and Israeli human rights abuses and participate in a boycott. But another reason is to increase the financial trigger from 1,000 to 100,000 is to reduce the number of people that are impacted by the law, and thereby reduce the number of people who have standing to challenge the law in court, including this journalist who's in court now to fight the law. By raising the financial trigger, some supporters of the bill that you passed last week hope to avoid a court ruling that completely strikes down the underlying law. And so I ask, why not avoid the courts with certainty and repeal? And the third reason, the third reason you should vote for House Bill 712 is that regardless of political views, we should all protect the right to boycott. The ACLU has repeatedly said that such congressional laws suppressing boycotts of Israel are not only constitutional, but that this right to boycott is protected under the Constitution. If our state can force people to choose between their livelihoods and their First Amendment rights, where will this end? If the state can ban boycotts of a country, then the state can just as easily ban boycotts of an organization. Political boycotts are a legitimate form of protest, and they are protected by First Amendment. Regardless of whether you support the boycott of Israel over its treatment of the Palestinian people, you must and should protect the right to boycott. So this bill, House Bill 712, completely repeals the anti-boycott law before the courts do it for us, and it protects the taxpayers from any future litigation. By repealing this law, we will show that Georgia is a national leader by acknowledging the significance of First Amendment rights and the right to boycott, regardless of one's political stance. Georgia lawmakers will eliminate the possibility of legal challenges and be a model in addressing unconstitutional laws in Georgia and around the country by remedying it through a repeal. Thank you so much, Chairman Taylor.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the committee? Anyone want to ask any questions? Chairman Fleming?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning.
Good morning.
So you want us to, how does our law stop anybody from boycotting Israel?
The bill that was passed last week, that you passed.
Well, just in general, how does any law we have on the books stop anybody from boycotting Israel if they want to?
Well, if they want to.
Please speak into your mic.
I'm sorry. So the current law, if a person wants to sign a contract with as the state of Georgia, and if they want to boycott, I mean, they have to sign a pledge right now, so they have to.
But it doesn't stop them from boycotting Israel. It only says we as a state aren't going to do business with them if they do, correct?
That's true, and and many courts have ruled that, or 3 courts right now have ruled that isn't contradicts our First Amendment rights.
But the United States Supreme Court hasn't ruled that way.
That is true. It has not. It's just the last one was the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, we have someone any other questions? We do have a person that would like to speak to the bill, and Dr. Cohen, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, please speak a little louder. Thank you.
Sure. Can you hear me now? Does that work?
Yes.
Great. I just want to really support everything that Representative Evans just said. I'm speaking as both a Georgian, but also a Jewish Georgian. And as a Georgian constituent, I also would love to see the support from HB 712 to repeal the anti-boycott law from 2016 and the recent bill that passed. Georgia is already being sued, as we know. Representative Evans talked about that. Civil rights and faith-based organizations locally and nationally have been fighting to uphold the Constitution. As mentioned, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals has also recently reiterated the illegality of the Arkansas anti-boycott law and similar laws in Texas and Arizona. I think the fact that Georgia can show its leadership here and around the country by recognizing the mistake made by undermining these constitutional rights and instead reaffirming our First Amendment rights would end any future problematic litigation for the state. And besides its unconstitutionality, it's deeply problematic for our Georgia legislators to exceptionalize one country. In the original law, Georgia disallows individuals and companies from entering into state contracts with Georgia unless they state they do not boycott Israel, which just speaks to the gentleman's question. The law provides no rationale for the special treatment of one country, begging the question why such a law is needed at all. And individuals and corporations have the right to make ethical decisions about boycotting based on whether a country or company is involved in civil and human rights violations or any other criteria that is of ethical concern. The state of Georgia has no business, in my opinion, as both a Georgian and Jewish Georgian, attempting to interfere with the right or to use economic coercion to prevent this exercise. So HB 712 makes it clear that the state of Georgia will no longer interfere with our constitutional rights or undermine our fundamental right to boycott. And it'll also eliminate the attempt to place one country, and in this case it happens to be Israel, outside the bounds of human rights advocacy. So I urge you, all as Georgia lawmakers, to show Georgia's leadership by supporting HB 712. And as Representative Evans said, as a Jewish Georgian, it puts us in a predicament which puts the Jewish community or Jews outside of the law in this case if you support it based on supporting Jewish people. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Are there any other questions? Anyone from the committee? Let's see. I think Representative Nguyen, are you on the line?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to make a quick comment and thank Representative Evans for bringing this forward. I've had a lot of Jewish constituents reach out to me and express their support of this, specifically around just the fact that we only have this law for one country, and that's something that she brought up before. So thank you, Representative Evans, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. This is a hearing only. We appreciate your time in presenting your bill, and thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. I will tell you our next bill is House Bill 608, and the author has not gotten here yet, but we do have people. Oh, there you are. I didn't see you. Thank you. Please come forward. You were behind the pillar. Thank you.
I was staying out of sight.
Okay.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the time this morning with the committee. Bringing House Bill 608, and we provided a substitute this morning, LC 364747S. Really just want to start by thanking a lot of the members on the committee. as well as Commissioner Nunn and certainly industry people. This really just highlights how important it is that the efforts that we're trying to make to get broadband to every Georgian that is in need. I think we've done some great work with 402, and we look forward to continuing to progress on that. From the committee meeting the other day, there was a lot of confusion over some of the efforts that we were making. And in conversations with Commissioner Nunn, we've pared this substitute considerably back from the other day in efforts of continuing to move the ball forward, but understanding some concerns with the gratuity clause and what have you. So from the other day, so that bring members of the committee up to date, we have stripped out a few things, but what the bill really does, and the intent from the very beginning, was to stretch federal and state dollars as far as we could to ensure that every community in Georgia has the opportunity to receive funding for these kind of programs. And encourage, and the biggest part of that is the definition of unserved area versus unserved location. That is we feel a critical element in this. When you go into unserved areas, you can get up to almost 80% of an area, and you get 20% that gets completely left out. This would provide an opportunity for that 20% to be served and make sure that areas that might already have funding for projects like this don't receive additional funding to enhance their current services. That is the intent. That is the general intent of the bill. I do have Michael Wall here with me. If the chair would allow, I know that there's some things that he would like to say as far as the intent of this was, and see if that we can answer any of the additional questions or concerns of this current substitute.
Okay, I do have a question. Let's see. Number 4, Representative Oliver.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you rather you answer the questions or Mr. Wall asked it, whatever your preference is?
I think either one of us. I think it probably depends on the nature of the question. I think when we start getting into some of the technical aspects, certainly, although I'm a vehicle, I'm not necessarily the expert on all things. So it would depend on the nature, and I know Commissioner Nunn's here to speak to it too, so I appreciate him being here as well.
Madam Chair, let me just pose a general question and then a couple of specifics, then y'all can decide.
Yes, ma'am.
I know there's a 402 program now,
Mhm.
and I know that was worked out a couple of years ago under the leadership of Chairman Powell, I think, Jay Powell, and I'm trying to figure out exactly what changes that program in this bill. That's my general question. Specifically, I'm looking at lines 23 to 26 and trying to figure out what the exact purpose of that is. And then if I flip over to line 161, it looks like paragraph G, it looks like that's, I don't think I've seen anything like that in a bill before, where if an applicant says something incorrect in an application and there's an investigation that the applicant has to pay the DCA, that's a new provision in law? So however you'd like to proceed, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer that.
You can come to the mic, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Representative Oliver, very good to see you. So on question, by the way, for introduction, I apologize. I know some of you I have not had the pleasure of meeting. I'm Michael Wall, and I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs for Comcast Cable Communications. I've had the privilege of representing the company here and our over 5,000 employees and over 1 million subscribers for 15 years. And I have enjoyed every day of it, including the questions that Representative Aller poses. Representative Aller, on line 23, to answer that specifically, you're speaking to the question related to what those are called special construction fees that happens daily in all kind of service providers areas, where basically it says, if you had a home or a business and you called a provider and you asked for service, if that provider had to ask you to help with special construction costs, then broadband is not available to you. In other words, if we cannot do it for a regular installation fee, if the provider cannot do it for a regular installation fee, then you are considered unserved or unavailable. And that's helpful to homes and businesses that sometimes get further along the line, if you will, on services, and they may require $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 of a special construction fee. And so what this does is it protects homeowners and businesses from someone saying, oh, but there is broadband in your area. There is not if you have to pay that type of fee in order to extend it to you. So that's an enhancement to the bill. What that is doing is it's modifying the word available, because the word available without definition is a bit up to the discretion of all of us, right? So what that's doing is it's tying down to what basically we use to determine the mapping as far as when the company sent DCA our information. This is how we did it. We did it based on this definition. So it was just, again, enhancing the bill. As most of you know, this was passed through the ACE Act in 2018. It's been on the books for 3 years. We've had a lot of conversation with the departments, both DCA, the Georgia Technology Authority, and others, as well as with our local government partners, to really hone in on the experience and expertise for all of us. And, myself, Comcast, we participate in a myriad of state funds and programs just like this in other states. And so this builds off of that experience over the last 3 years. It's just updating it. As it relates to your question related to lines, remind me what line you pointed out there.
161,
161.
paragraph G.
That is the transparency period. So what this says is if an application once an application's been made and DCA posts those applications on their webpage, providers, local leaders, constituents can have an opportunity for 45 days to send information in that says, I noticed in application X, someone is building broadband, or we are building broadband on this street. It's not on the map yet because the map reflects where broadband services are currently, but private providers or a local provider, someone is currently building here. So someone has been able to make the business case to serve this area. So what that does, if you turn to lines, just want to make sure I share this with you as well. Lines 188 and 189 is it works in partnership with that to say, if such is determined to maybe catch a served location within the application, the DCA can work with the applicant to revise their application to ensure that it only serves the unserved homes and businesses, and it doesn't capture someone who may already have services or has construction currently pending at their location.
Madam Chair, my general question, the 402 program exists today, and tell me exactly what this changes that 402 that allows Comcast to do something differently than exists under the current program.
So one is having that transparency period to share more information in real time when the application process is happening. And it's supposed to, according to the bill, happen in the timeline that DCA already has established for the application process. It is not to extend it or do anything to delay it whatsoever. The second thing it does is it drills down on the definition of unserved area. In 2018, we didn't have the first class maps we now have. And so what this does is it says an unserved area in definition on, I apologize. Unserved area is defined on line 60. And what this says is we tied it to a census block in which services were not available to 20% or more locations. Well, when you go through the map that DCA has put together, you find several census blocks that have a lot of served locations within them that are deemed unserved. For instance, this happens to be in the county of Thomas, House District 173. And in this census block, there are 156 locations. Of those 156 locations, there are 121 locations served. There are 35 unserved. So what this does is it allows the fund to target dollars to the unserved locations within that unserved area. So you're not putting government subsidies where the 121 homes and businesses already have broadband. And so that is what this does. It's not saying that we did anything wrong or this General Assembly did anything wrong in 2018. It's building upon the 3 years we've had to enhance our knowledge and our understanding of where the problem is and how to target it with dollars. Does that answer the question?
Comcast under 402 can apply to provide service, and Comcast under 647 can apply to provide service in both cases.
That's actually not correct.
That's what I'm confused about.
So in both House Bill 608, as it currently is written, and in Senate Bill 402, Comcast must partner with a local government in order to apply through a partnership.
Okay.
The local governments are the applicants considered eligible applicants in both. What this does is it helps the state drill down and ensure the dollars are actually going to the unserved homes and the unserved businesses. That is really the gist of House Bill 608. It's to tighten the language to ensure that is occurring. So we don't unintentionally send dollars somewhere where service is already existing or could be being built presently.
Thank you. We have some, are there anybody on the committee that has any questions? Okay. What's your number?
23, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is it there?
Close enough. Yeah, there it is. And is Mr. Wall still at the podium there? I'm kind of blocked out.
Yes, sir, Chairman Black. I think I recognize the voice. I don't see you, but I think it's Chairman Blackman and I am here.
Yes, sir. So is it your contention then that essentially that the DCA would not have the ability to kind of redirect in these instances if there was a service in process or a infrastructure in process? Or I guess I'm just curious as to.
That's correct, Chairman.
So
our fear is obviously, right, you, the legislature, write the policies. You create the laws. The rules and regs follow your policy intent. And so the rules and regs cannot follow what's currently not in statute. And what's not in statute right now is this. And so either the General Assembly addresses that so that we get it right the first time out of the gate, or we provide some discretion to the department in order to do this. And we participate in these all over the country. We do not know of a single program that does not allow for a transparency process upon the application to ensure that nothing is being, done, if you will, sent dollars out that you can't say, hey, just want to raise our hand and tell you that 103 Main Street through 110 Main Street is currently being built today. Someone has found a business case to build services to them. We know it's not on the map. We'll be happy to submit further data to introduce this knowledge to the body so that you can use the dollars where we truly need to subsidize service because someone cannot get there. Does that answer the question, Chairman?
Well, just a quick follow-up. So I guess the bill and the law and the way that it's written now, you're saying that we don't address it as unserved? It's not.
That's correct.
We just.
What House Bill 608 does is it ties unserved areas definition to a census block based on a percentages of service. So if you do not have 80% service to the locations in that census block, the entire census block under law today is considered unserved. But what our map tells us is that there are hundreds of locations within these unserved areas that are actually served. And so what we want to make sure that we bring to the body is the understanding that this could occur under the law today, where the statute says fund the unserved areas. But what we really want to do are fund the unserved locations in those unserved areas. And this is not necessarily for Comcast or another provider to be able to come in and participate further in the program. This is simply protecting the scarce taxpayer dollars that are going to be used in this program to extend service to the homes and the businesses that do not have it today. And our fear is if we don't drill down further and hone in on the language, there is a potential that it's used where it's already in existence. And therefore you'll have government competing with private providers' investments or other investments that have come from the FCC Rural Digital Opportunity Fund or the USDA Rural Utility Service Fund. As you know, there's an announcement, I think today, for a new broadband project that's going to be occurring. And so DCA has done a wonderful job working with GTA on building our maps, but at some point that map is a static point in time that tells you where services are. And what this bill is going to do is help you enhance that knowledge when the actual application process is occurring. And it's worked very well in every state that we participate in. I hope that answers your question.
To some degree, yeah, Madam Chair. I'll try to follow up with you offline. Thank you.
Thank you. Since this has been coming up, I think we have another person to speak to the bill. Commissioner Nunn, would you like to come forward, please?
Happy to, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. Let me get rid of that. And it's good to see you bright and early on a Friday morning. I am Christopher Nunn. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Community Affairs. And I want to thank Representative Wiedauer for his sincere commitment to broadband. I know that he and I are aligned in our commitment to serving the unserved parts of the state. And I know that all of the bill signers are very passionate about this topic. And so I appreciate that. And I also want to acknowledge the providers who are vital partners in the Georgia Broadband Deployment Initiative. You know, we know that the providers play a vital role in solving rural broadband. I believe that there is ample opportunity for all of them to play a role in getting service to Georgia's 507,000 unserved locations. Now, I appreciate, as has been said earlier, that it is your role to develop policy for the state. And I appreciate the hard work that goes into that. Each one of you who was here and served in the 2018 session voted for SB 402. In fact, that bill passed the House by a vote of 160 to 3. Now, I trust that you understand that executing this policy takes some time. And I know we've got a few new members on this committee, so I thought that it might be helpful just really quickly to touch on some of the background here. In 2018, the House and Senate embarked on parallel efforts to address this need, culminating in SB 402. That legislation is comprehensive, and I'm only going to focus on two elements for which DCA, as the state's coordinating broadband entity, is responsible. First, the map. Georgia's broadband availability map is a first in the nation and was necessary because estimates of unserved Georgians were widely regarded to be inaccurate. In fact, the FCC maps were proven to be understated by almost half. Our initial map was released in June of 2020 after more than 19 months of hard work. Now, prescribed by statute, the map is not solely for illustration. It's intended to support a grant program. The grant framework was also prescribed in statute with rulemaking delegated to DCA. Now, this process was done collaboratively with extensive stakeholder involvement. It provides for grants to be made to competitive applications from local development authorities working together with qualified broadband providers. Applications will be scored based on factors that are clearly outlined in rules. Most notably, the number of, this includes the number of unserved locations to be served. But there are other factors like cost structure, ability to leverage other funds, provider qualifications, and local commitment to making a project successful. From day one, we recognize the importance of stakeholder engagement. So to ensure regular dialogue, we convened an advisory council. And since August of 2018, that group has met monthly. It includes Comcast, AT&T, Windstream, the Telecom and Cable Associations, as well as GMA, ACCG, and others. For 2.5 years, we have worked together to build the foundation prescribed in SB 402, mapping the grant program, model ordinances, et cetera. And at each meeting, we talk about concerns and potential legislative needs. For this reason, I was surprised when HB 608 landed on my desk last Wednesday. Admittedly, one provider had mentioned at the end of our January 21st meeting that he may pursue legislation about redefining unserved by location. Now, this comment came 1 week after the governor's budget, but 18 months after the grant rules were finalized. And honestly, before my first meeting with Representative Wiedauer last Thursday, there had been no discussion about the grant rules since June of 2019. We've reviewed the substitute language, and I sincerely appreciate the author's efforts to address one of our more serious concerns, which was regarding the constitutionality of providing grants directly to providers. However, as Chairman Fleming commented the other day, the original bill sought to do a couple of things, and we still have some concerns. Stated simply, this bill will slow the deployment of funds included in the governor's budget recommendations. So for the first time since launching this program, you have appropriated grant funds, yet we now face potential delay in launching a program 2.5 years in the making. ACCG stated that this is not a simple bill, and it is not. In fact, broadband is not a simple topic. However, I must say that the program was a bit easier to explain before some of the misinformation that has surrounded this legislation. So let me highlight a few of our concerns. And I'll work off of the substitute LC 364747S. On line 116 through 118, this states, in no instance shall any state funds be used to support a project that will provide broadband to any location where service is already available. First of all, if broadband service is already available, then the area is not unserved. And if an area is not unserved, it is not eligible for state grant funds. All of that is explicit in both the statute and rules. You know, none of us aim to overbuild in our state. We have enough need in the state that we must stretch these funds as far as possible. However, it's worth noting that we've worked closely with other states and federal agencies in developing this program. And one thing we've learned is that absolute terms such as none and any proved to be obstacles. This was an issue for USDA in their first round of Reconnect grants. And I've heard my colleague Janine Miller caution about the importance of a tolerance threshold. I imagine that is why the legislature established an 80% threshold in defining unserved area in the statute. Now, we've implemented some additional safeguards to prevent unintentionally funding served locations in unserved areas. And I want to speak to that specific point that was just brought up by Mr. Wall. In rule, the state does not provide funds to served locations in unserved areas. The unserved area defined in statute, targets applicants to funding. Because of the precision of our maps, we can isolate to the location level. In the case of the census block that he mentioned in Thomas County, which is an anomaly, but correct. There are plenty of census blocks in the state that have more than 50% served. We would not provide grant funding for the 120 some odd locations, but only for the locations that were unserved in the unserved area. Now, if there proves to be actual reason for concern, we can make additional changes in rules based on experience and lessons learned. However, a legislative change now will require that we pause to revisit the rules and methodology, delaying the deployment of recently appropriated funds. Now, on lines 118 through 123, this bill states an eligible applicant shall not receive funding for a project that's already obtained federal, state, or local funds. Now, I'm curious why this sentence grew from 40 to 76 words in the latest revision, but I'll focus on the fact that this restrictive language implies that overinvestment is a problem. It's trying to solve a problem that simply does not exist. As grant makers, we aim to stretch funds as far as possible, and we understand the importance of leverage in doing so. Hence, a fundamental problem with this legislation. Our grant program is designed to contribute up to 50% of capital towards a project. Priority is given to projects that best leverage state funds. So, for example, an applicant seeking $2 million for an $8 million project serving 2,000 unserved locations would score better than an applicant seeking $4 million for a similar project. Now, I know it's too early for word problems this morning, but hopefully you follow my logic. The balance of these funds may come entirely from a provider, but it's possible, even anticipated, that some of this funding could come from other public sources. Several counties, for example, have included broadband in their SPLOST. Now, this grant program will not reimburse a community for expended SPLOST funds, as I have heard some suggest since this bill was dropped. But it's entirely probable that project financing would include both state and local or federal funds. Restricting the ability to co-invest will change the essence of this program. Now, incidentally, the newly inserted language on or after July 1st, 2021 ensures that any action that you take will impact all appropriated grant funds. On Tuesday, Representative Roberts asked about the pipeline. There is no pipeline. There have been no grant funds. Now, our team has supported 6 successful USDA grants. Perhaps some of those providers will turn to us for assistance in edging out those networks to unserved areas that are adjacent. We've designated 18 communities as broadband ready. That's another element of the SB 402 legislation. And I expect that some of those communities will take steps to partner with providers and pursue grant funds. And we have a technical assistance workshop scheduled for March 23rd. That's an early step in a funding cycle that will take months. You see, grant applications, especially those that are involving public-private partnership, will take months to develop into a fundable project. And it's improbable that any grant will be awarded before July 1st, 2021. So any legislative change you make must factor into this program before moving forward to expend the first dollar. This bill simply delays that deployment. Finally, on line 161, this bill creates an unnecessary challenge mechanism. And conceptually, this is not bad. In fact, it's a component of the USDA Reconnect program. And I heard Mr. Wall say that he's not aware of a single state that doesn't have such a challenge process. However, no other state has invested in mapping the way that Georgia has. This change is unnecessary because the legislature has already created a challenge process in OCGA 50-40-22. And that challenge process is more efficient because it takes place earlier in the grant cycle. Now, Mr. Wall is correct. there is no such thing as a real-time live map. That would be cost prohibitive, I assure you. I imagine that providers also focus on planning, not on a real-time basis. And so today, providers have 4 opportunities annually to validate these unserved areas. First, in the process of submitting their data. And then once that data is mapped, they again have the opportunity. Thirdly, once we have aggregated all data, and then finally, through a formal protest process. Again, we start the mapping process over in November of every year. So there's a constant flow of information in the mapping effort. Again, only areas that are deemed to be unserved are eligible for grant funding. So creating an additional challenge process simply adds delay in the grant making process. There's more, but I think you get my point. This bill creates some unnecessary delay in deploying funds that have been recently appropriated. Now, let me say, we are certainly open to improving the program. We've proven that commitment with the mapping. We piloted the maps, we revisited those, we improved the process for both efficiency and to help the providers. It's just difficult to understand the need after a collaborative rulemaking effort to further delay deployment of such much anticipated grant funding to serve unserved communities before the first dollar has been distributed. So thanks for allowing me to address some of these issues, and I'm happy to entertain questions.
I do have some people that want to speak online. Representative Sands, are you there?
Yes, Madam Chair, but my question's been answered.
Please, do you have any additional questions?
No, just a motion at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Representative Nguyen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually had a question for either Michael Wall or the bill sponsor, if that's okay.
Thank you.
So I had 2 questions. One was, I know that you're trying to address, an issue of places being potentially left out or not served. Can you speak about what areas specifically in the state that would benefit from legislation like this? And then the second question I had was, have other states done something similar to this, and how did it work there? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Please go right ahead, Mr. Wall.
Representative Nguyen, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, just making sure. So the first part, what areas of the state would this address? This addresses actually lots of areas of the state, suburban, urban, as well as rural, extremely rural. What this really does is make sure that it targets our dollars to those areas where there's no provider whatsoever. And I heard Commissioner Nunn, and I want to thank him for his comments. And I do appreciate that DCA understands the risk that's inherent in the statute today, that there are served locations within unserved areas. And hopefully we can work through this together. And we intend to do so. I am a partner with DCA and others on their advisory council. And we have been talking about this for quite some time, including a meeting as early as February the 10th that I can recall with his staff. But for what it's worth, on the piece, the second part of your question, remind me, Representative Nguyen, that second part.
Oh, the second part was just wanting to get a better understanding of, if this has been done in other states and it hasn't been successful, or what that looks like.
So it's been successful. Here's what other states do that's different than Georgia. Georgia is the only state that I'm aware of that tied our unserved areas to census blocks with percentages of served or unserved at 80-20. Most states simply say an unserved area is an area that lacks broadband. And then that's determined based on whether that home or business has broadband or not. The difference with our state statute is it says that a census block is only served if its locations within it are served at 80% or more. That is a tall bar to get to. And in our cases, and I think Commissioner Nunn pointed this out as well, I didn't just find one census block when I went through the map. I found numbers of them. I found them in Coweta County. I found them in Thomas County. I found them in Columbia County. I found them in Fulton County. I mean, I'm pretty sure that it's across the board in the state. I don't know the number of them. I wasn't able to count them, but I do know that the entire area lights up unserved. Now, I believe in my reading of the rules, Commissioner Nunn is correct. We hopefully will target just the unserved locations within those, but the statute does not align with that 100%. It doesn't back it up 100%. It just says unserved areas. And so all we were simply trying to do is tie it to the unserved locations within those unserved areas. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Representative Roberts, you have a question?
So I always, when I see a bill, I always try to figure out what's the real why behind it. And it's changed a lot since we heard it in subcommittee. It started out that y'all wanted direct access to the funds. So is this that you're afraid that areas are going to be considered served and it's going to limit the dollars that the grant money that can come in that you could actually go in and serve?
No, actually, it's the exact opposite, Representative Roberts. So what we're concerned with is that providers are out there making investments today to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars to serve areas. We are all leaning in and trying to find ways to continue to grow our existing footprint. And we want to make sure that while we're doing that, the existing footprint doesn't find government competition coming in through subsidy in areas unintentionally, where there's already a provision of service. And most importantly, the homes and businesses that are out there that are truly unserved, that are still unserved, they are going to be the most expensive to serve. So we want to make sure the entire full lead of the program is aimed at them and targeted at them so that we ensure that where the subsidies are needed, they are directed.
So do you have some reason to assume that the current program that we haven't even tried yet isn't going to do that?
So the program has been on the books for 3 years.
Right.
The first time it's been funded is this year. And so the reason why that hasn't been addressed up until now is because there's been no funding. And so I didn't feel that it would be in this body's best interest until we had the maps and knew this problem existed to address it now. The maps were just finished in July of last year. And so that is part of the reasoning for why the timing is now. We did not know that these served locations existed within our unserved areas definition until the maps were done.
I got you.
And the other purpose, you asked about the purposes. The bill's purpose was really 4 purposes originally: to allow providers direct access, because we have that in every state and every federal government program today. For instance, the FCC Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, that's delivering over $300 million to our state right now in grant applications. It was done directly to providers. The USDA RUS fund is given directly to providers. Do we work with our local government partners on those applications? Absolutely. We are in constant conversation with our city councils as well as our county commissions on these efforts. They are just as interested in growing broadband in their areas as you all are. And one of the things that we do with them is when we apply in those areas, we ask them to send letters of support, to pass resolutions that are supporting the program in the application. And we contend we will do the same here. We want to do the same here. Unfortunately, the confusion around the gratuities clause in our Constitution, which is arguably an issue here, we contend it is not. But because of that, we have removed that so that we can move this bill forward, because the other 3 parts, which are to drill down on the unserved locations issue that we've learned through the mapping, to allow the transparency process so that we ensure that the applications are presented on a web page and that we, the providers, as well as the public, can make comments about any area that's subject to that pending application, and what broadband is happening is available to DCA and others that are making these decisions in real time. And then third, ensuring that no provider goes to the FCC and participates in a competitive bid process, agrees to put up their own dollars, their skin in the game, if you will, and then come down here to Georgia and ask for dollars to backfill that same project, because they're already now committed and obligated to serve those unserved homes and businesses within that application at the federal level. So what we don't want to see is someone come and ask state dollars to backfill the $1 million they put up to win the bid at the federal level. That's what we are concerned about, and that's what that piece is about. There is some new language there, as the commissioner pointed out, and I want to make sure that's clear as well. That language was added as a part of an agreement or understanding ACCG's concerns when they brought them to you at the last committee. And what that says is, if they have gone ahead and they've done a SPLOST, or they've done something in a way to provide broadband to their constituents, we do not want this bill to penalize them in any way. And so what it says is, if they fell short of reaching all the unserved locations, they will still be eligible for state funding in this bill. And it actually probably enhances, once again, the language that's currently on the books to allow for that. The other thing it does is it allows the opportunity for the providers and DCA to continue to talk with one another about what's happening in real time. And I hope that answers the question. It's truly just a clarifying measure. It is in no way intended to extend the program or delay the program. We would be open, in fact, if we needed to ensure that we put language in that says, if rules and regs could not simply clarify these things in time for the first round, that it becomes effective after that first round. But we do believe these changes and these updates are necessary to the statute.
Thank you. We have a couple people that want to speak. We have a member of the committee. However, I've got two people that want to testify. I'm going to ask if you would come quickly. Hunter Hopkins, if you want to testify, got 2 minutes. We're running on a clock right now. So is he here? Okay.
I'm online if you can hear me.
Please go right ahead.
I don't need to testify. Mr. Wall covered all the points.
Okay, thank you. And Nancy Petra?
Yes, good morning. I'm here. Hi, I'm Nancy Petra. I'm here on behalf of AARP Georgia. We advocate for our members 50 plus across the state. And I'll be really brief since time is running short. Rural broadband expansion is a top priority for our members across the state. We still do a lot of activities via phone because so many of our members do not have broadband. So we would just ask that you could support this bill to help get our members, through the digital divide that keeps them from being able to access services and things that keep them living independently and aging in place longer. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Oliver.
I get that we're trying to redefine and help on a definition of unserved. What I'm still not clear about is the application process still require a partnership from a local developing authority. That's not changed.
That's correct, Representative Aller.
And I'm wondering if there's an agreement or disagreement on that.
Absolute agreement. That was the issue with the gratuities piece.
So
And
that's
look,
not changed.
That's not changed.
Okay.
That's right. That is a construct that has to work in our state. I mean, we've had this debate for 2.5 years. I get that in Tennessee, things work differently because Tennessee doesn't have to adhere to the Georgia Constitution. But yes, the local development authority will have to be involved as the partner in the process.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we still have a lot of discussion about this bill, and I have a lot of reservation and concerns about this. At this time, I'm going to not call for a vote on this. I'm going to ask the speaker to take this issue up in our rural council. We have people in places, I know it's in the urban areas, but people from Leary and Cogdale and Windy Ridge and Calvary and Reno, they need broadband and they need it badly. I don't want to do anything to jeopardize what we have in place right now. There are good things in this bill, but I think there needs to be more concise I guess, folks getting on the same page with some of these things. And I'm going to ask that we hold this bill for now. And do you have something you'd like to say, Representative?
If you don't mind, Madam Chair.
Please.
Again, I think that everybody's interested in this and willingness to talk and flesh out these issues. I just appreciate and it really speaks to the bipartisan nature of this and how desperately the entire state of Georgia needs these services. And I just appreciate the time you've spent with us.
Thank you. I do feel like we can iron these out, and I think that a good place would be in Rural Council. I appreciate it. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.